Hey, Megan.
Well, as we count down to the debate tonight, there is a different kind of countdown in the battleground state of Ohio. That state now has 72 hours to set up a system to verify the eligibility of 660,000 new voters. That order coming from a federal court. Meantime, House Republicans are renewing their push for a Department of Justice investigation into widespread voter fraud allegations by the liberal-leaning activist group ACORN. And a conservative think tank has just filed a lawsuit against the group, alleging that it is engaging in a pattern of corrupt activity that amounts essentially to organized crime. So, can ACORN actually face charges for conspiracy to commit election fraud? Might the DOJ get involved here? Well, CLETA Mitchell is a Republican attorney specializing in election law. She testified before the House Judiciary Committee about ACORN, this very issue, in July. Hi, CLETA.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. All right, so we've seen these prosecutions going forward. We've seen people plead guilty. 8 people in Missouri plead guilty from ACORN to election fraud. 3 people in Washington State plead guilty. A man is behind bars who worked for ACORN in Michigan right now, facing similar charges. But the question is, can you go after ACORN, the group, ACORN itself?
Of course you can. And the question is, why hasn't the Department of Justice gone after ACORN long before now? When I testified before the House Judiciary Committee in July about ACORN, I all of these documents inserted into the record about the civil penalty that ACORN paid to the King County, Washington prosecutor's office in order to avoid prosecution in the state of Washington. And they had to enter into that agreement in 2007. ACORN has been at this for a long time, and the question is, why isn't the Department of Justice going after them, and why hasn't a civil or a criminal RICO case been filed against them before now?
Right, RICO is the statute that normally the feds use to go after organized crime, but it can be used for any sort of conspiracy or criminal enterprise, which some believe ACORN is. CLETA, let me get you to weigh in, though, because ACORN says, hey, we're the ones who brought the problems to the authorities' attention in a lot of these instances. We know we've got some bad apples, but that doesn't mean the organization is bad. So might that impede any potential DOJ action against ACORN?
Well, I think they ought to have to prove that. And frankly, that's a very new response from them, because essentially what they've done historically is that they have had a pattern where they send out these registrars and they register tons of people to vote. They've been paying these people by the registrant rather than by the hour, and then they wait and they hold those registrations and they turn them in at the very last moment, the last day that registration closes, to try to keep officials from being able to verify addresses. Now, here's a very important thing important point I want to make, because what the left wing will say is, oh, well, these are just isolated instances of fraudulent voter registrations. There's no evidence that these people actually vote.
Right.
Let me tell you something. Remember the Supreme Court decision this past summer in the voter identification case? These same people who oppose, who are ACORN, also oppose voter ID, having to present an identification card at the driver's license.
Yeah, they think it leads to voter suppression. That's been the debate between Democrats and Republicans since the beginning of time.
And that's part of this.
Yeah, but
because they register people.
Let me ask you this. We got into this on O'Reilly a little bit last night. What is ACORN's motivation to have fraudulent registration forms filled out? In other words, what benefit does ACORN get if it has somebody go out and fill out dozens of forms that are bogus if, in fact, no one then shows up to actually vote on those forms?
My question is, how do we know they don't show up? If they don't, listen, the left opposes having secretaries of election boards send out postcards to all these new registrants to be sure that they really are real and that they live at a place.
Right, they don't even want that amount of follow-up.
Well, that's right. Sheldon Whitehouse, the Democratic senator from Rhode Island, has a bill pending in the United States Senate to outlaw that practice. They are opposed to voter identification, voters having to present ID. This is a continuum. And in answer to your question, they want to change the outcome of the election. That's what their motivation is. They want to change who's elected.
But I want to ask you, do you think the DOJ is actually going to get involved here?
I think we need to put as much pressure as we can, because the voting rights section of the Department of Justice has been a wholly owned subsidiary of the left for 40 years, and it's time to break their stranglehold.